When you format your lesson, your learning goals section, a table is a pretty good way to go about it. Now, again, you're going to use, well, not again, I haven't said this yet, but you would write your learning goal on the left-hand side in one block down. And I'm assuming 4 learning goals for my example here. You may have 3, you may have 5. I would not recommend having more than 5 learning goals because that requires you to completely cover more than one learning goal per lesson. And in the same way that multiple behavioral objectives are difficult to obtain in one lesson, multiple learning goals are also very difficult to obtain. So I would recommend that you stick to one learning goal. You'll state the learning goal, and then you'll talk about what the standards are that it addresses. And that can be whichever standard set you are held to. Then talk about the types and levels of that particular learning goal. And give a brief rationale for why that particular learning goal is appropriate for the students to whom you are going to teach it. The next question is, where do learning goals come from? I'm tempted to say the stork, but of course that's not right. First, standards for instruction can be reworked as learning goals. Second, scope and sequence documents. There are all kinds of those that are floating around school districts and school buildings. Probably what you're teaching has come out of something like that. There are instructional models, and there are statements about, well, again, probably scope and sequence for those instructional models, and then the pacing guides. All of these are just some of the many possible places from which your curriculum stems, or from where it comes to you, and your learning goals come out of those. Generally, any statement about what the students are supposed to know and be able to do at the end of an instructional time can either be just straight out stated or perhaps restated as a learning goal. Now here's an example. This is from the South Carolina Social Studies Standards, 4th grade. This is Standard 4.1. The student will demonstrate an understanding of the exploration of the new world. The indicator that I'm using here as an example is 4-1.3, and if you read through the entire thing, you can read through it with me or I'll read it to you. Use a map to identify the routes of various sea and land expeditions to the New World and match these to the territories claimed by different nations, including the Spanish dominance in South America and the French, Dutch, and English exploration in North America, and summarize the discoveries associated with these expeditions. Now, first thing that we see here is that this sample indicator is huge. There are college courses that cover that. Obviously, in the 4th grade, you are not supposed to go to that level of depth. But what are you going to cover? Well, first thing is, remember that a learning goal is going to be a broader statement. It's not going to list the activities that students are going to do. So we're going to try and stay away from the lower end of Bloom's taxonomy when we state the possible learning goals. The things that are in yellow are basically the skills that are listed there. And there are some giveaway words in that sample indicator. If we look at Bloom's taxonomy, There are some giveaway words that tell us which levels we're talking about there. Words like summarize, let's see, identify, that's a fairly low level. Let's see, what else do we have? Well, that's about it. Summarize. We'll look at the possible learning goals that we could pull out of this indicator. And notice that these are statements that are going to be broad enough that we may not be able to cover them in one lesson. The student will understand the influence of the Spanish in the exploration of the New World. The student will identify the most significant discoveries associated with the French, Dutch, and English exploration of the New World. The student will appreciate. We have understand, identify, appreciate, the similarities between the exploratory activities of the Spanish, French, Dutch, and English. These statements can easily come back to the indicator and pull in, when we start teaching them, the skills that are listed in the yellow, or the lower level competencies that are listed in the yellow. But notice how we've kind of stayed away from those in the learning goal statements. Okay, before we quit, just a few reminders. First, the teacher work sample consists of 5 lessons, but some learning goals are going to require more than one lesson to teach, so you'll need to plan accordingly. You may, as I said, you may have only 3 learning goals. If that's the case, that's fine. But 2 of those learning goals are probably going to stretch over 2 lessons, or one will go over 3 lessons. And if you get into that kind of a thing, you may want to consider finding a bit more specific learning goal. Second statement, learning goals are not a listing of activities. They are statements about knowledge, skills, and/or dispositions or attitudes. Specific statements about what students will do to demonstrate the competencies are objectives. Those are going to be found in the lessons themselves. And the third point is learning goals must be completed and approved prior to teaching lessons associated with the teacher work sample. Part of the strength of the teacher work sample is the order and the structure of the project itself, the overall project. And I will go so far as to say this: if learning goals have not been approved and instruction happens, then we're going to have to start over with learning goals, and those lessons that were not approved are not going to be able to be counted. There are so many reasons for which because why that's important. You'll find those out as we go through the rest of these tutorials, but please get your lesson plans, your learning goals approved before you write your assessment plans and your lesson plans. And that's that. If you have any questions, please address them to your instructor.